Ethan had been walking for hours, the dense forest around him thick with mist and the sound of distant thunder. He had come to this remote planet on a solo expedition, seeking a quiet place to study the unique ecosystem. But now, the weather had turned against him. The sky had darkened suddenly, and within minutes, the rain began to pour. The heavy rain made the path ahead nearly impossible to see. The trees shook violently as the wind picked up, and the thick, tropical leaves did little to shield him from the downpour. Ethan pulled his hood tighter and kept moving, hoping to find shelter before the storm worsened. After a few more minutes of walking, he saw it, a small cave nestled at the base of a cliff. It wasn't much, but it was enough to offer some protection. He hurried toward it, hoping the storm wouldn't last too long. The cave was dark and damp, the air cool and filled with the smell of wet earth. Ethan stepped inside, shivering from the cold. His boots slipped slightly on the rocky floor, and he quickly moved deeper into the cave, away from the rain. He set down his backpack and began to collect some dry twigs and fallen branches from the cave's entrance, hoping to start a fire. The storm raged outside, the sound of the wind howling through the trees. After several attempts, Ethan managed to get a small fire going. The warmth felt good against his wet clothes, and he sighed in relief. He had planned to return to his ship before the storm hit, but now that was impossible. He'd have to wait it out here, at least until morning. As the fire crackled, Ethan noticed something strange. At the back of the cave, just beyond the reach of the firelight, he thought he saw something move. It was quick, almost like a shadow, but he couldn't be sure. His heart raced, and for a moment, he wondered if he should leave the cave and take his chances in the rain. But the storm outside was getting worse by the second. It was much too dangerous to venture back out now. Cautiously, Ethan grabbed a small flashlight from his bag and shone it toward the back of the cave. He froze when he saw it, an unfamiliar shape, lying motionless in the shadows. There in the dim light was a figure. It was humanoid, but not human. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he stepped forward, his mind racing. He had heard rumors of alien life forms, of course, but he had never expected to encounter one himself. The figure was tall, its skin pale and shimmering with a strange, soft glow. Its hair was long and seemed to ripple like water, flowing even though there was no breeze. Ethan could barely make out its features, but the sight was enough to send a shiver down his spine. Was it alive? He approached slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello," he called out softly, unsure if he should be afraid. "Are you okay?" The figure didn't respond. It was still, like a statue. Ethan crouched beside it, checking for signs of life. The alien's chest rose and fell, faintly but steadily. It was breathing. Without thinking, Ethan pulled off his jacket and gently draped it over the creature. He knew he couldn't leave it there, not when it seemed to be in such a state of distress. Maybe it was injured, or maybe it had simply collapsed from the same storm that had caught him off guard. Ethan sat back on his heels, gazing down at the strange being. His mind was racing with questions. What was it doing here? Where had it come from? And most importantly, what would happen next? The cave was silent except for the sound of the rain pounding against the entrance and the crackling of the fire. Ethan stared down at the strange being before him, unsure of what to do next. The alien was still unconscious, but its breathing was steady, a small sign of hope. He wondered how long it had been here and why it was in such a condition. He couldn't just leave it alone. As Ethan sat there, unsure of how to proceed, a sudden shift in the alien's body made him jump. The creature's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, it seemed confused, its gaze wandering as if trying to understand where it was. Then, its eyes locked onto Ethan's, and a strange, quiet energy seemed to fill the air between them. Ethan felt a mix of fear and awe. The creature was beautiful. Its skin glowed faintly in the dark, like the soft shimmer of stars. Its long hair, almost silver in color, cascaded down its back like liquid light. The alien blinked several times, as though adjusting to the dim firelight. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice hesitant. The alien didn't respond with words. Instead, it raised a delicate hand and touched its forehead, as though trying to focus. Its gaze moved from Ethan's face to the cave around them, finally landing on the fire. Ethan quickly moved to stoke the fire, adding more wood. The flames flickered higher, casting long shadows on the cave walls. He looked back at the alien, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It was humanoid in shape, but everything about it was unlike any life form he had ever studied. Its features were ethereal, its body fluid and graceful, and its eyes. Its eyes were like windows to a vast, unknown universe. The alien blinked again, and then, in a soft, musical voice, it spoke. "Where am I?" The words were gentle, but they were unmistakably clear. Ethan was stunned. The language was unlike anything he had heard before. It was neither harsh nor robotic. It had a natural, melodic rhythm to it. He didn't know how to respond. Should he say something? Was it even safe to communicate with it? After all, he had no idea what kind of being this was, or where it came from. "It's okay," Ethan said cautiously. "You're safe. We're in a cave, and it's raining outside." He pointed to the entrance, where the storm continued to rage. The alien turned its head slowly, studying the entrance to the cave. It seemed to understand the situation, but said nothing more. It looked back at Ethan, its eyes wide, filled with both confusion and curiosity. Ethan felt a strange pull, as though the alien was studying him just as much as he was studying it. There was a quiet intensity in the way it observed him, as if it were trying to understand not just the situation, but him as a person. "Do you need help?" Ethan asked, his voice soft, almost as if he were speaking to a fragile creature. "You're not from around here, are you?" The alien blinked, and then, for the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corners of its lips. The smile was not one of happiness, but of recognition. It was as though it knew exactly what Ethan was asking, yet couldn't fully explain. The alien's hand shifted slightly, and in a slow, deliberate motion, it reached for the jacket that Ethan had placed over it. It ran its fingers over the fabric, and Ethan saw a flicker of something in its eyes, something akin to understanding. Then, in the softest of tones, the alien spoke again. "I am lost." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Lost? He had so many questions, but for now, he realized he had to focus on helping this strange being before him. He wasn't sure what it meant by lost, but it seemed to be in a state of distress, and that was enough for him to act. "It's okay," he repeated. "You're not alone. We'll figure this out." As Ethan spoke, the alien's eyes softened. There was something deeply calming about the way it looked at him, as if, in its own way, it understood him too. Ethan couldn't help but feel that this strange encounter was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. The fire crackled softly in the cave, the only sound other than the storm's distant roar. Ethan sat cross-legged across from the alien, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? And how had she ended up here, in this strange place, in need of help? For a while, neither of them spoke. Ethan carefully observed the alien, watching her every move. She seemed calm now, her breathing even, though her eyes were still filled with confusion. It was clear that she wasn't fully aware of her surroundings yet. She kept glancing around, almost as though she were trying to make sense of everything, like a traveler waking up in a new world. The alien's glowing skin seemed to pulse gently in the dim light of the fire, casting soft shadows on the cave walls. Her long hair, silver and shimmering, lay loosely around her shoulders. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the otherworldly beauty before him. But beyond her physical appearance, there was something else, something mysterious about her, as if she was connected to something far bigger than either of them could understand. Ethan took a deep breath, unsure of how to proceed. He had to help her, but what did she need? Was she hurt? Was she capable of understanding him? The communication barrier seemed impossible to cross, but he had to try. "Are you injured?" Ethan asked slowly, his voice gentle. He pointed to her arms and legs, hoping she would understand. The alien blinked and glanced down at herself. She examined her body, her face showing no sign of pain. After a few moments, she nodded. Ethan's heart eased a little. She didn't appear to be physically harmed, though there was still a sense of exhaustion in her eyes. She raised a hand and touched the side of her head, as if trying to speak but couldn't find the words. It was as if her mind was still tangled in confusion. Ethan's brow furrowed. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he could tell she was trying to communicate something important. "I think you're still adjusting to being here," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "But you're safe. We'll figure things out." The alien's eyes seemed to lock onto his, and there was a flicker of something deeper, almost ancient, in her gaze. It was as though she could read his thoughts, or at least understood the intent behind his words. Slowly, she moved closer to the fire, her delicate movements like a dancer's. As she reached the warmth, she closed her eyes and seemed to relax for the first time. Ethan watched her closely, his mind whirling. What could he do for her? He had never encountered an alien species before. The mysteries of this world were nothing compared to what lay ahead. But at this moment, all he knew was that she needed help. And despite the overwhelming circumstances, he felt an unspoken bond forming between them. "Do you want something to eat?" Ethan asked. It felt like a simple question, one he would ask any traveler in need. He reached into his pack and pulled out some rations, hoping it would help. But the alien didn't respond to the offer, not in the way he expected. Instead, she looked at the food, then back at him, and shook her head softly. Ethan paused. She was communicating with him, just not in the way he understood. "I'm sorry," he murmured, unsure of what to do next. "I don't know how to help you, but I will try." The alien looked at him again, her gaze softer now, almost grateful. And for the first time since they met, Ethan felt a small sense of hope that despite the unknown, they might find a way to understand each other. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer strangers. Something deeper had begun to connect them, and Ethan wasn't sure where it would lead. But one thing was certain, this strange encounter was only the beginning. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, though the sky remained overcast. Inside the cave, the atmosphere was calm. The fire had burned down to a steady glow, casting soft light on the faces of Ethan and the alien. It felt like an odd, quiet moment of peace in the midst of chaos. Ethan sat by the fire, trying to think of what to do next, while the alien, who had introduced herself as Lizara, watched him silently. Lizara had settled herself closer to the warmth, her long silver hair shimmering in the firelight. Her eyes, though still filled with confusion, seemed more focused now. There was a quiet intensity in the way she looked at Ethan, a silent curiosity. It was as if she was learning about him just as much as he was trying to learn about her. Ethan, for his part, couldn't stop wondering about Lizara. She was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Her skin glowed faintly, and her presence seemed to hum with energy. Every small movement she made was graceful, as if she belonged to a world that was far beyond his understanding. But beneath that beauty, there was something more, something deep and ancient, like a force of nature that he couldn't fully grasp. "Where are you from, Lizara?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle but filled with curiosity. He wanted to know everything about her, to understand who she was and why she was here, but he wasn't sure how to communicate that. The language barrier still existed between them, despite the soft sounds she had made earlier. Lizara blinked at the sound of her name. It was clear she understood the question, even if she couldn't answer it with words yet. She shifted, slowly, as though trying to find the right way to explain. Then she raised her hand to the sky, motioning as though she were reaching for something far above them. Her fingers stretched, her expression soft and thoughtful. Ethan watched closely, trying to interpret the gesture. He glanced up at the cave entrance, where the rain had begun to thin out completely. Maybe she was trying to tell him that she came from the stars, from the sky. It seemed like a simple interpretation, but the look in her eyes made him wonder if there was more to it than that. From the stars? Ethan asked, trying to make sense of her actions. Are you from another planet? Lizara's eyes softened, and she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a response, but it wasn't enough. Ethan wanted to know more. He wanted to understand who she was and how she had ended up here. As if sensing his thoughts, Lizara slowly reached into a small pouch at her side and pulled out a strange, glowing object. It was smooth and rounded, about the size of a small stone. It emitted a soft blue light, pulsing rhythmically as if it were alive. Lizara held it up for Ethan to see, her eyes locking onto his. Ethan stared at the object in awe. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. "What is that?" he asked, unable to hide his fascination. Lizara's gaze never wavered. She seemed to understand that Ethan was curious, so she gently placed the object on the ground between them. She pointed at it, then at her chest, and then gestured to the cave entrance. Ethan's mind raced. Was it some kind of communication device, or perhaps it was something even more important? Could it be a way for her to explain her origins to him? Lizara spoke again, her voice soft and melodic, but the words were still foreign to him. Ethan felt a pang of frustration. There had to be a way to bridge the gap between them, to understand her and help her. He watched as she closed her eyes for a moment, deep in thought, before she slowly picked up the glowing object again. She cradled it in her hands, as though it was precious to her. Ethan realized something in that moment. Despite the confusion, despite the unknown, Lizara wasn't just a lost traveler. She was a part of something far bigger, a connection to a universe he couldn't even begin to imagine. And even though they couldn't speak the same language, they were beginning to understand each other. Not just through words, but through shared moments, through gestures, through the unspoken understanding that connected them. Lizara smiled faintly, and for the first time, Ethan felt a true sense of connection between them. He didn't need to know everything yet. For now, they would take it one step at a time, together. The morning after the storm, the cave felt strangely peaceful. The last traces of rain had faded, and the world outside was quiet. The air was fresh, cool, and filled with the scent of wet earth and the lingering mist that hugged the forest. Ethan sat by the fire, warming his hands, while Lizara rested nearby, still holding the glowing object she had shown him the night before. Her eyes were calm, but there was something more in them now. An intensity, as if she were waiting for something. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the object in Lizara's hands was important. It wasn't just a simple piece of technology. It was part of something much bigger. The way she held it so carefully made him think it was a key to something, something that could unlock secrets far beyond his understanding. After a moment of silence, Lizara stood up, her movements graceful as always. She reached for the object, and with a soft, determined motion, she began to walk toward the back of the cave. Ethan watched her curiously. He knew she was trying to communicate something, but he wasn't sure what. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice tentative. Lizara paused for a moment and looked back at him. Her eyes met his with a quiet strength, and then she continued her path toward the cave's darkened depths. Ethan didn't want to stay behind, unsure of what she was doing, so he followed her. There was something in the way she moved that made him feel like he couldn't let her go alone. The deeper they ventured into the cave, the more strange and unfamiliar it became. The walls seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the rock itself was alive, pulsing with energy. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just any cave. There was something hidden here, something waiting to be discovered. As they reached a wider section of the cave, Lizara stopped. She held the glowing object out in front of her, almost as if she were scanning the area. Ethan couldn't help but feel that they had arrived at a place of great importance. There was an ancient feeling to the cave, like it had been untouched for centuries. Yet in some way, it also felt as though it was alive, aware of their presence. Lizara knelt down, placing the object on the ground in front of a smooth, dark stone surface. The object glowed brighter for a moment, and then, with a soft hum, the stone began to shift. Ethan watched in awe as the rock seemed to move, revealing a hidden panel beneath it. The panel was covered in strange symbols that glowed with a faint, eerie light, just like the object Lizara had been carrying. "This?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "What is this?" Lizara looked up at him, her face calm but serious. She pointed to the symbols on the panel, then to the object, and finally to her chest. It was clear she wanted him to understand that this was something she was connected to, something deeply personal. Ethan kneeled beside her, trying to make sense of what was happening. The symbols were unlike any language he had ever seen, though some of them vaguely resembled patterns he had studied in ancient human texts. There was something about the way they seemed to pulse with energy, as if they were alive in their own way. He reached out and gently touched the panel. The moment his fingers made contact, a soft vibration ran through the stone, and the symbols on the surface began to change. They shifted, rearranging themselves in a new pattern, one that Ethan instinctively felt was meant for him to read. Lizara looked at him, her eyes wide with anticipation. It was as if she knew that he was the key to unlocking the mystery. And in that moment, Ethan realized something incredible. This cave, this hidden chamber, wasn't just a random shelter. It was a place of great significance. It had been waiting for someone to find it, to uncover its secrets. And that someone, for reasons he didn't yet understand, was him. The vibration grew stronger, and the stone panel slowly opened, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the earth. Ethan's heart raced. What lay beyond that passage? What would they find there? Lizara stood up, the glowing object still in her hand, and motioned for Ethan to follow. Without hesitation, he stood and moved toward the dark passage. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets this alien world held, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a curious traveler. He was a part of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Ethan took a deep breath as he stepped forward, following Lizara into the narrow passage. The air was cooler here, and the walls seemed to close in around them, the rock smooth and strangely warm to the touch. As they walked, the light from the glowing object in Lizara's hands illuminated their path, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The further they went, the more Ethan felt like they were entering another world entirely, one that had been hidden from everyone for ages. The passage wound down in a spiral, deeper and deeper into the earth. Ethan's heart raced with anticipation. What was waiting for them? What kind of discovery were they about to make? The thoughts kept swirling in his mind, but he focused on Lizara. She moved with purpose, unbothered by the darkness around them, as though she had been here before. She seemed to know where she was going, and Ethan trusted her guidance. It was clear that whatever she had been seeking, they were getting closer to finding it. They finally reached the bottom of the winding tunnel, where it opened up into a vast underground chamber. The space was enormous, far bigger than any cave Ethan had ever seen. It felt like they had stepped into a hidden world, a place that had been sealed away for millennia. The chamber was bathed in soft, glowing light, not from any source Ethan could see, but from the very air itself. It shimmered around them, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. At the center of the chamber, there was a large, circular structure made of a smooth, dark stone. Its surface was covered in the same strange symbols that had been on the panel in the cave, but this time they were even more complex, shifting and swirling as if alive. Lizara approached the structure with a sense of reverence. She knelt beside it and placed the glowing object into a small recess at its center. The moment the object touched the stone, the symbols on the surface erupted in light, bright and dazzling, filling the entire chamber. Ethan had to shield his eyes from the intensity, but even through his hands, he could feel the energy pulsing in the air. The light slowly dimmed, and when it faded, something incredible happened. The stone structure began to shift, moving like liquid, its surface rippling as if it were alive. Ethan gasped in disbelief. He had never seen anything like it. The structure was changing before his eyes, revealing hidden layers and compartments. As the stone shifted, a large glowing screen appeared in the air before them, suspended by an unseen force. The screen flickered to life, showing a map of stars, constellations and planets Ethan had never seen before. The map was beautiful, intricate, and filled with patterns that made no sense to him. Lizara stood up and pointed to the map, her eyes filled with determination. Ethan followed her gaze, trying to make sense of the display. The stars seemed to be connected by thin, glowing lines, and at the center of the map was a symbol, one that he recognized. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the panel earlier, the one that had been on the stone back in the cave. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was the answer to all the questions that had been building in his mind. This map, this technology, it wasn't just a random discovery. It was a map to something far bigger, far more important than he could have ever imagined. Lizora's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a deep sense of urgency in them. She had found what she had been searching for. This map, this place, it was her path home. The journey they had begun together was not just about survival or understanding. It was about something much deeper. It was about discovery. And Ethan realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that he had just become a part of something that would change everything. The map continued to glow before them, the stars shining like beacons. Lizara reached out to touch it, and as she did, the entire chamber seemed to hum with energy. The structure, the map, the very air around them, it all seemed connected, as if everything in this hidden world was waiting for something. And now, that something was about to happen. Ethan stepped closer to Lizara, unsure of what the future held, but certain that whatever it was, they would face it together. The map in front of them shimmered with glowing stars, each point connected by delicate lines that pulsed with energy. It was a guide, an intricate network that spanned across vast distances of space, pointing to places Ethan could never have imagined. Some of the locations on the map were marked with symbols he didn't recognize, while others were connected to the mysterious alien writing that had appeared in the cave. Lizara stood still, her fingers tracing the edges of the map, her face filled with a mix of awe and something else, something deeper, as if the map held the key to a part of her soul. Ethan could sense the importance of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a map of stars. It was a map to her past, to her people, and perhaps to the answers she had been searching for. Ethan watched her for a moment, unsure of what to say. He had no idea how to break the silence that hung between them, but he knew one thing for certain. Lizara's journey had just taken a new turn. This map, this discovery, it meant everything to her, and now it meant something to him too. He was a part of it, whether he was ready or not. "What does it mean?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice filled with wonder. He wasn't sure whether Lizara could understand the depth of his question, but he needed to know. What did this map show? What was it guiding her toward? Lizara turned her head slowly to meet his gaze. Her eyes were filled with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing something inside him, something deeper than he was willing to admit. She placed her hand over the glowing symbol at the center of the map, and for a brief moment, the entire chamber seemed to respond. The air vibrated, and the stars on the map shifted, pulling together in a pattern that Ethan couldn't quite grasp. She gestured toward the glowing lines, then pointed to a distant point on the map, her finger tracing a line that stretched across the stars. The point she indicated was far, far away, on the edge of the map, a place where no lines connected, a place that seemed to be unreachable. Lizara's eyes darkened as she glanced back at Ethan, her expression serious. The weight of what she was showing him seemed to hang in the air. It was clear that this was a moment of decision. Whatever lay at the end of this path was unknown, but it was a path she needed to follow, and she wanted Ethan to be a part of it. Ethan stepped closer, feeling the gravity of the situation. He had always been a wanderer, moving from place to place, never staying in one spot for too long. But this was different. He had never felt such a strong pull to something before. The mystery of the stars, the alien technology, Lysara herself, it all felt connected. He didn't fully understand what he was getting into, but deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away now. "Is this where you need to go?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. "Is this where you came from?" Lysara nodded slowly, her expression softening. She placed her hand on the map again, and a new symbol appeared, one that was unfamiliar to Ethan, but seemed to hold significance to her. She gestured toward it, then pointed back to herself. The message was clear. This was her destination, and it was tied to who she was, to her past, and to the journey she had been on long before meeting him. Ethan stood still for a long moment, contemplating her words, her actions, and the journey that lay ahead. He had never imagined his life would take such an unexpected turn. But now, faced with the truth of Lysara's mission, he realized something. He wasn't just helping an alien find her way home. He was being given a chance, an opportunity to step into a world beyond anything he had ever known. The question remained, though. Could he walk this path with her? Could he leave everything behind and follow her into the unknown? Ethan took a deep breath, his heart racing. He looked at Lysara, who was waiting for his answer, her eyes full of hope and uncertainty. This was her choice, but now, it was his too. And in that moment, he made his decision. "I'll go with you," Ethan said, his voice steady and filled with resolve. "Wherever this path leads, I'll follow." Lysara smiled, her expression brightening with relief and gratitude. The two of them stood together in the heart of the hidden chamber, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The stars on the map glowed brighter, as if recognizing their decision. And the journey, one that would take them far beyond the stars, was just beginning. With their decision made, Ethan and Lysara turned away from the glowing map, their eyes now focused on the path ahead. The energy in the chamber seemed to hum with a new intensity, as though the very walls were alive and aware of their decision. It was as if the cave, the stone, and the hidden world around them had been waiting for this moment. Lysara held the glowing object firmly in her hands, her face set with determination. Ethan, though uncertain of the challenges that lay ahead, felt a strange sense of calm. Together, they had chosen this journey, and no matter where it would take them, they would face it together. He could already feel the adventure unfolding in his chest, pushing him forward into the unknown. The stone structure that had opened up earlier began to shift again, revealing a narrow passage leading out of the chamber. The walls of the passage were lined with more of the strange glowing symbols, but now they seemed less mysterious, more familiar. Ethan couldn't explain why, but he had the feeling they were being guided, as though the cave itself knew exactly where they needed to go. As they walked, the passage grew more expansive. The air became lighter, and the ground beneath them felt softer, as though the cave was slowly transitioning into something else, something that was not entirely of this world. The atmosphere around them felt charged, filled with the hum of ancient energy. Ethan couldn't help but wonder how long this place had been hidden from humanity. Was it always here, waiting to be discovered, or had it been lost for eons, waiting for the right person to find it? Lysara didn't speak as they walked, but Ethan could feel her presence beside him. Her every step was purposeful, and her eyes remained fixed on the path ahead. There was something magnetic about her, something that made him feel as though he was walking beside a force of nature. He had no idea what she had been through, or where she was from, but he knew one thing: she was no ordinary person. She was someone connected to something far bigger, far older than he could ever comprehend. The further they traveled, the more the environment changed. The passage widened into a cavern that stretched upward, high into the darkness above. The walls were lined with strange crystals that emitted a soft, pulsing glow. These crystals bathed the cavern in a faint, otherworldly light, casting long shadows that danced across the floor. The ground was covered in thick moss, soft and spongy underfoot. Ethan couldn't help but stop for a moment, his eyes wide with wonder. The place was beautiful in its own alien way. It felt as though they were walking through the heart of a forgotten world. The quiet was almost overwhelming, the kind of silence that made you feel as though you were the only ones left in existence. Lizara paused ahead of him, turning her head slightly as though she sensed his thoughts. She gestured for him to continue, and they moved forward again, deeper into the cavern. There was a small opening at the far end, and beyond it, Ethan could see a faint light, like the glimmer of stars. As they reached the opening, the light grew brighter, and the passage opened up into a vast underground valley. The sight took Ethan's breath away. The valley stretched out before them, illuminated by bioluminescent plants and glowing rivers that snaked through the landscape. Strange creatures, some with wings, others with soft, glowing bodies, flitted through the air and across the ground, their movements delicate and graceful. "This," Ethan whispered in awe, "this place is incredible." Lizara nodded, her eyes reflecting the beauty of the valley. She stepped forward, and Ethan followed, his heart racing with excitement. This was no ordinary world. This was a place of wonder, a place of secrets, and they were just beginning to scratch the surface. As they ventured deeper into the valley, the sky above them began to shimmer, the stars overhead shifting in strange patterns. It was as though the entire world was alive, pulsing with energy, waiting for something. Ethan couldn't help but feel that they were not alone. There was something watching them, something far more ancient and powerful than anything he had ever known. And he knew that Lizara had brought him here for a reason that was slowly becoming clearer with every step they took. They continued onward, and as they did, Ethan realized that this journey wasn't just about finding answers. It was about discovering something greater, something that could change everything. And he was ready to find out what that was. Ethan's heart raced as he walked beside Lizara through the glowing valley. The world around them felt like a dream, a place untouched by time. The air was crisp, filled with the sweet scent of bioluminescent flowers that bloomed along the riverbanks. Every step they took seemed to take them deeper into a world that was ancient, yet alive with energy. It was like walking through the pages of a forgotten story, where each turn could reveal a new chapter. Lizara's movements were calm, but there was a determination in her steps that Ethan couldn't ignore. She was leading him, not just through the valley, but towards something that was far beyond his understanding. Every once in a while, she would glance back at him, as if checking to make sure he was still following, still with her. Her expression was serious, but there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes, a hope, perhaps, that was yet to be realized. The valley seemed to stretch endlessly, and as they walked, Ethan felt the weight of the journey settle over him. This wasn't just an adventure. This was something important. Lizara had brought him here for a reason, and that reason was becoming clearer with each passing moment. She had been searching for something, and he had agreed to follow her. But what was it? What did she hope to find in this hidden, alien world? The path they followed soon began to narrow, leading them toward a large structure that stood at the far end of the valley. It was a towering structure, made of the same smooth, glowing stone they had seen earlier. The stone seemed to pulse with a faint light, almost as if it were breathing. The closer they got, the more Ethan felt the ground vibrate beneath his feet, a low hum that resonated in his chest. Lizara stopped before the structure, her eyes scanning the surface. Ethan stepped up beside her, his gaze fixed on the towering walls. There were symbols etched into the stone, symbols that seemed to match the ones from the cave, the ones on the map. But these were different. They were more complex, layered on top of each other in intricate patterns. It was as though they told a story, one that had been written long ago and was waiting to be read. Lizara reached out, her fingers brushing the stone surface. The moment her skin made contact, the structure seemed to respond. The symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves in a new pattern. Ethan watched in awe as the stone began to open, revealing a doorway hidden within the surface. The doorway glowed with a soft, blue light, and the hum in the air grew stronger. Lizora looked at Ethan, her expression unreadable. Then she stepped forward, entering the glowing doorway without hesitation. Ethan hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay beyond. But the pull of the unknown was too strong. He followed her inside. The space beyond the doorway was vast, a dark chamber lit only by the soft glow of the symbols on the walls. As they walked deeper into the chamber, the air grew warmer, thick with an ancient energy that seemed to surround them. In the center of the room was a large pedestal, and on it, something lay covered by a cloth. Lizora moved toward the pedestal, her eyes fixed on the object resting there. She reached out, lifting the cloth slowly. What she uncovered took Ethan's breath away. There on the pedestal was a small, delicate object, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a crystalline structure, glowing faintly, its surface covered in symbols that matched the ones they had seen all along. But this was different. It was not just a part of the technology. It was the source, the heart of everything they had uncovered so far. Lizora's fingers gently brushed the crystal, and a wave of energy filled the room. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and Ethan felt a surge of power rush through him. The air around them seemed to crackle with electricity, and the room pulsed with life. Lizora turned to him, her face illuminated by the soft light of the crystal. Her eyes were filled with emotion, but there was something else in her expression, a realization, a truth that had been waiting for her to find it. "This is it," Lizora said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "This is what I've been searching for. This crystal. It's the key to everything. It's the heart of my people, the heart of our power." Ethan's mind raced. The key to her people, the heart of their power. He had so many questions, but one thing was clear. This discovery would change everything. And as he looked at Lizora, he knew that their journey was far from over. They had only just uncovered the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Ethan stood in the dimly lit chamber, his eyes fixed on the glowing crystal in front of him. The energy that pulsed from it was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the very air around him was alive with power. The symbols on the walls continued to shimmer, dancing with light as the crystal seemed to call out to them, filling the room with a deep, resonating hum. Ethan could feel it vibrating in his bones, a feeling that both excited and unnerved him. Lizora's hands hovered over the crystal, her fingers trembling slightly. There was something in her expression, a mix of hope and fear. She had found what she had been searching for, but now, the truth was in her hands. This was the key to her past, her people, and perhaps to something even greater. Ethan started, but his voice faltered. He wasn't sure what to say. He had thought he understood, but now, standing here in front of this alien power, he realized how little he truly knew. What does it do? Lizora didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were locked on the crystal, and for a moment, she seemed lost in the depths of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, but filled with determination. "This crystal holds the memories of my people," she said quietly. "It is the heart of our civilization, the source of our knowledge and power. For generations, it has been hidden away, protected. But it is also dangerous. Whoever controls it controls everything." Ethan's mind raced as he processed her words. The crystal wasn't just a key to her past. It was a weapon. The power contained within it could shape the fate of entire civilizations of worlds. Lizora had known this all along, and now, the weight of that knowledge seemed to rest heavily on her shoulders. "You said it was hidden away," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the rising tension in the air. "Why now? Why bring it back?" Lizora looked up at him, her eyes filled with sorrow and resolve. "Because my people are gone," she whispered. "They disappeared, leaving only fragments of their history behind. But we didn't vanish completely. The crystal, it holds the key to bringing them back, to awakening the ancient power that lies dormant. I have to use it." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Ethan didn't know what to say. Lizora had come to him for help, And now, it was clear that her mission was far more complicated than he had realized. She wasn't just searching for answers. She was looking to restore her people, to bring them back to life. But with that power came a dangerous responsibility. As Lizara reached for the crystal, the room seemed to pulse with a new energy, stronger than before. Ethan felt it too, an electric charge that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The crystal seemed to respond to her touch, glowing brighter, and the symbols on the walls shifted again, forming new patterns. Suddenly, a loud noise broke the stillness, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. The walls trembled, and the ground beneath them shook. Ethan stumbled, trying to keep his balance, as Lizara's eyes widened in shock. "It's starting," she said, her voice filled with urgency. I wasn't ready. The crystal is awakening faster than I thought." Ethan grabbed her arm, steadying her. "What's happening? What do we do?" Lizara's expression hardened, and she turned to face him, her voice filled with determination. "We have to leave. Now. The crystal's power is too great to control. If we don't get out of here, everything will collapse." Before Ethan could react, Lizara pulled him toward the entrance they had come through. The shaking of the ground grew stronger, and the walls of the chamber began to crack, pieces of rock falling away, as the structure around them seemed to come alive, reacting to the crystal's awakening. They ran, the noise growing louder, the air thick with energy, as they hurried back through the narrow passage they had entered. The once peaceful valley now felt like a place of danger, as though the very earth beneath them was reacting to the crystal's power. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Lizara, the urgency in her movements pushing him forward. Finally, they emerged from the passage, standing once more in the glowing valley. But the peaceful beauty they had seen earlier was gone. The sky above them had darkened, the stars swirling in strange patterns as the ground beneath their feet trembled. The entire valley seemed to be in turmoil, reacting to the crystal's awakening. Lizara looked around, her face pale. "We can't stay here. We have to leave before it's too late." Ethan nodded, his mind spinning with everything he had just learned. They had uncovered the truth, but now they were faced with a new challenge. The power of the crystal was awakening, and with it came a new danger, one that neither of them was prepared for.